Let's make this beautiful hummus platter. Everybody loves this dish, especially in the summertime. It's so bright and colorful, and it's healthy. It's filled with fresh vegetables, some homemade hummus, and the nice thing about it is we could even eat it with a fresh vegetable like a sliced cucumber. So I'm going to dig in and have a bite and just show you. Easy to eat and delicious. The first thing we need to do is we need to have some hummus for the hummus platter. And I have homemade hummus here. And the other option is you can use a store brand hummus, like Kava is a no oil hummus. I get it at Whole Foods. The recipe for my hummus is here on YouTube. And so I'm not going to make it from scratch in front of you, but you can find my recipe and I'll also put it in the show notes. But it's a very silky, smooth hummus, and it just has some really good ingredients in it. Fresh lemon, garlic, tahini, and it's whipped up in the food processor. It's just a really good tasting hummus. So I think it's better if you use your own homemade hummus, but I know people are pressed for time, so that may not always be possible. So we're just going to take our hummus and put a couple of dollops of it on this big tray. And you don't have to use a tray as big as the one I have. You can use a smaller one. I think in my original video that I did, or I posted a picture of it, I had it just on a plate like this size. And everyone kept asking me, how did you make that? How did you make that? And so I thought, well, I just need to demonstrate because it was so easy. So I have an offset spatula. An offset spatula is one that is flat. So that way you don't have to hold it at a weird angle. You can just hold it straight. This is like something you use in cake making. It's really good for smoothing off the top of a cake. And it makes everything spread really easy. And what we're after with our hummus platter is we want a very thin layer of hummus. We don't want a big thick layer because we're spreading it out and we're topping it with a lot of other things. So with each bite you want to have a little hummus, but you also want to have some vegetables. So it's important to keep it kind of thin, unless you like it really thick. That's kind of up to you. And nobody's going to see this layer, so it doesn't have to be perfect. But you saw how easy that is to spread it. And then it's up to you to put whatever you want on top. So in my example, I'm going to be putting a bunch of different vegetables. So how do you choose your vegetables? Well, over here, I have a bunch of options. And really, you know, this is Texas, it's summertime. I'm growing a bunch of this stuff, peppers and tomatoes and cucumbers in the garden. So that makes it really easy for me to decide what to put on the top. I have all these different varieties of cherry tomatoes and, you know, prairie fire striped tomatoes and all these beautiful tomatoes. I could chop those up, put those on the top. So whatever you choose to put on there. And then if you have an herb garden and you have fresh herbs, I've got parsley and basil, so I'm going to put basil on this one, but you could put parsley or basil. Some people call it a Mediterranean platter or dip. Some people just call it a hummus board. It doesn't matter, whatever you want to call it. Oh, and you could put it on a cutting board or like a charcuterie board. I wouldn't put it on a board this thick, but I've seen it on different boards. Okay, so now we have to decide which vegetables we're going to use and in what order. Well, the order doesn't matter. So I'm going to show you how I cut these up, because that was another question I got asked. When I posted this as a Facebook post, what I thought was obvious was something that people wanted to know. So in just a minute, I'm going to take these vegetables that I've washed and prepared, and I'm going to show you how I cut them up into this size. So I'm going to start with a tomato. I like to use these Roma tomatoes because they don't have big wet interiors, and so I cut around the middle. So I just kind of leave the middle seedy part, the part that is kind of watery and not that appetizing on a thing like this. And then I just take those outer pieces and I cut those into strips. And if you see any parts that are little, you know, like bruises or parts that don't look that appetizing, just set them aside. And so then once I've cut them into strips, I can rotate them and then cut them into little chopped pieces. And what I'm after are like 1/4 of an inch dice. It's like a small dice, because we don't want to have giant chunks of any kind of vegetable on our platter. Okay, then I'll set those aside. So I've got my tomatoes. And then next, I can do bell pepper. And we're trying for a variety of colors. So green bell pepper would have probably been a better choice, but right now the green bell peppers in my garden aren't producing, and in the store the green bell peppers were kind of not very good looking, so I got red bell peppers. Or you could use orange or yellow. I'm just cutting them into strips, just like I did, but a little bit thinner than the tomato. And then rotate the strips. Same thing, little 1/4 inch diced pieces. I'm gonna set those aside. And then let's get some different color going here. So I have the cucumber. And my garden cucumbers are these little Japanese cucumbers, so they're very skinny, but they also don't have big, they don't have big seeds in the middle. They barely have any seeds. So I cut them into kind of little matchstick pieces by just kind of cutting them into slices. And then I can take the slices and cut them into planks, I call them. And just like we did with everything else, it's the same process. We take the long pieces, rotate them, and then they easily cut into these little dice pieces. So, you know, the more you do this kind of thing, the quicker you get at it. But, you know, that's how I made everything, because I get asked this a lot when people see the food. They say, well, how did you cut that up? And, you know, what did you do with that? And the last but not least is the red onion. So I cut a couple of horizontal slices. Oops, let's get these cucumbers off of there. And then I'm going to follow the lines down the onion. All the onions have some kind of vertical lines. I'm just going to follow those. And I'm just going to use 1/4 of this onion. I don't need all this. And then I cut down the lines, and then I rotate it, just like I did everything else. And the same thing. You end up with these nice little cubes of red onion. So that's it. So that gave me how I ended up, and if you see any big pieces that you didn't get, just go back and kind of touch them up. So that's how I got this nice, beautiful platter right here of chopped vegetables. It was that easy. That was quick. So, and the olives, these are Kalamata olives that I got in the deli section of the grocery store, and I just kind of rough chopped them. And they taste really good, but you could also use black olives. I also got some black olives because some people love black olives in this dish. It's up to you. So now we're going to construct the hummus board. Now I'm going to start putting these things on the hummus board, and it doesn't matter what order you put them in. So you can start with, these are the tomatoes, and you see how nice they are. They don't have giant pieces of seed, and they're not all watery, and that's what you want. You don't want to put a bunch of watery tomatoes on your hummus. Some red onions, and if you, let's say you like scallions better, like green onions, you could slice up some green onions and put that on there. It's up to you. And or white, some people told me they used like summer yellow onions that were really sweet. This is red bell pepper. And remember, you could use yellow, orange, green bell pepper to give it some different colors. And then we have our cucumbers. That gives it a nice, another color break with the green. And you see, I'm not overdoing it. I'm not putting everything on there that thickly, because you want to see that there's hummus here. You don't want it just to be, you know, a bunch of vegetables, but you don't know if there's anything else on here. So don't put it on too thick. Then we have our Kalamata olives. Spread those out because they're kind of rich. All right. And then we have the option of adding some other things, but one of the things I really like to add is toasted pine nuts. So I've got my pine nuts here that I've toasted in my skillet. And the thing about pine nuts, toasting them, they don't take very long, okay? Like, they're gonna be done in no time at all. I've got some I put in a bowl that cooled off a little bit. So if you leave your pine nuts in too long and you walk away for a minute, they'll burn. So don't turn your pan up too high, just to like a light, medium low. And as soon as they you start to smell them, they're done. Okay, then next we can put some herbs on this, but instead of putting the herbs mixed in with it, I'm just going to put some basil on top. So that's what I feel like doing today. I don't feel like adding a lot of chopped up basil to this, but I like the smell of the basil. I think it makes it look pretty, but we could sprinkle fresh basil in there, but I'm not going to because I don't know that I like the taste of that right now. You can also add some other things on top, like I have a traditional balsamic vinegar aged 18 years, so it's a really concentrated, delicious balsamic vinegar. We could drizzle it with this balsamic vinegar. I'm not going to right now. Or we could drizzle any kind of balsamic vinegar. I like to put some freshly ground black pepper, but you could also use any kind of spices that you like. And then I'm not going to put this on here because not everyone wants extra salt. But if you're a sea salt lover, some freshly ground sea salt would be really nice. So it's up to you to make it, customize it to make it how you like it. The last but not least thing, and I'm going to show you how I cut these, is we have to decide how we're going to serve this. So what I did before is I took a bunch of cucumbers and I arranged them around the edge as a way to get the dip out of here. So we could do that, that's an option, and I'm going to show you how I cut these cucumbers in a second. But we could take these cucumbers and go all the way around, or halfway around. So I think for this one, I'm going to put the cucumbers halfway around, and then I'm going to put other things the other half. Then we have the carrots. So I'll show you how I cut those here in a minute. So I'm going to put carrots along the other half. So you see I've got half of it cucumbers. And then I'll put carrots going around a little bit. Because not everybody likes cucumbers. I can't imagine that, but I have people tell me that they don't love cucumbers. Since I grow tons of them to make pickles, I eat cucumbers nearly every day, and I think they're fabulous because they taste good in the summertime. And my cucumbers are not bitter, and they don't have big seeds, and they don't taste like grocery store cucumbers. So they're good. Okay, so there we got plenty of carrots. And then the other option you have is crackers. So these are Mary's Gone crackers, which are oil-free crackers. They have all different flavors. This is everything crackers. It tastes like everything bagels, but I have the original ones over there. And they have black sesame. They have all different kinds. So what I like to do is set a bowl of crackers off on the side. That way people can have access to the crackers. But they don't, it's not on my beautiful, healthy, switch out one of these carrots. My beautiful, healthy vegetable bowl. Okay, so let me show you how I cut the cucumbers and the carrots, because somebody asked me that when I posted this. They said, well, how did you cut those cucumbers and carrots? So I thought, well, I never thought that that would be something people would ask about, but it is. So here's an example. Here was my cucumber, and I use the skins on my cucumbers because they're very tender. They're homegrown, and I don't use wax, but if you get grocery store cucumbers, a lot of times there's wax on them. So get the hothouse cucumbers because they don't treat them. They're wrapped in plastic. And I'm just cutting them on the diagonal. So you can see they're not super thin, but they're not super thick either. So I'm just cutting them at an angle. And by cutting them at an angle, that makes them like a dipper. If you were to just cut them straight across, you just have a tiny little circle of a cucumber. And that wouldn't be very helpful for this dish because you want some people to be able to dip it like a cracker. And the same thing with the carrot. So here's my carrot. The bottom part is a little skinny, so I don't really want to use that part. I wait until I'm about halfway down the carrot, and then I can start making these kind of really long diagonal cuts. And I just, I don't use any kind of mandolin for this because you can't, with a mandolin, you have to do things straight. And so there I get my nice planks or big pieces of carrots that could be used as dippers. So then all that leaves is tasting it. So here we go. We have this beautiful hummus platter. And how does it taste? Well, I've had it before, so I know. Let me get a small cucumber. Here, I'll tell you what, I'll get one from my collection that I just did over here. And I'm just gonna find a spot that has a little bit of everything. Cucumber, tomato, bell pepper, red onion, and everything, and a little bit of the toasted pine nuts. With the homemade hummus, this is better than the last one I made because I can taste all the fresh lemon and the garlic and the tahini and my fresh garbanzo beans in that hummus. So I really like this a lot. So please try to make this hummus platter. Make it your own. Use whatever vegetables you love that you have on hand, whatever herbs you have. Bring this to your party and people will be so impressed with just how it looks. And they won't realize that it really wasn't that hard for you to make it. So I hope you enjoy this and watch some of my other YouTube videos. I try to make whole food, plant-based meals and dishes that you would really enjoy. So thanks for watching. Bye-bye.